Honorable Senators and House Representatives of the Colombian Congress, thank you for the invitation to participate in this hearing on fracking. My name is Larysa Dyrszka. I'm a medical doctor with a specialty in pediatrics. For the past 10 years, I have been an advocate for people impacted by fracking and for the environment where children can grow up healthy. With fellow doctors and scientists, I co-founded Concerned Health Professionals of New York to raise science-based concerns about the impacts of fracking on public health. We compiled the peer-reviewed evidence into a compendium, and we released the first one in June 2014. The 7th edition was just released. It has over 2,000 references outlining the risks of fracking. In the next minutes, I will speak about chemicals and fracking waste, on links between fracking and cancer and respiratory disease, noise pollution, monitoring of health risks. I've included children since I'm a pediatrician. Please see our compendium for more details. Let me start with monitoring. In a search of the literature, I found no protocols for biomonitoring humans or animals exposed to fracking's impacts. To monitor, your public health system would have to come up with a protocol since no other country has been successful in doing this. Even if there was a template for monitoring, we do not feel that it would eliminate the risks to health. It would require knowledge of all the chemicals involved in fracking, pathways of exposure, the actions of the chemicals on the body, their metabolites, and how their presence can be evaluated. We do not have that information because industry maintains secrecy of the chemicals. We have regulations in the United States, both at the federal level and state levels, but the oil and gas industry has managed to find or create loopholes. As a result, proper studies have not been done. The research we have compiled reveals fundamental problems with the entire life cycle of fracking. It is a dangerous process with innate engineering problems that include unpredictable fracturing, induced earthquakes, and well casing failures that worsen with age and lead to water contamination and fugitive emissions. There are problems that cannot be prevented, like radiation releases and abandoned wells that serve as pathways for contamination, and operations like venting, flaring, and blowdowns that result in methane releases. The disposal of fracking wastewater remains a problem with no solution. When people live within sight of oil and gas wells, the result is a public health crisis. Our examination uncovered no evidence that fracking can be practiced in a manner that does not threaten human health directly. And let me give you our conclusion straight away. Since there is no evidence that fracking can operate safely, the only method of mitigating its grave harm to public health and the climate is a complete and comprehensive ban on fracking. In December 2014, the governor of New York State banned fracking based on the advice of the New York State Health Commissioner, who came to the same conclusion upon his review of the scientific evidence. So have many other states and countries. On air pollution. Areas with fracking build-out show high levels of ground-level ozone, poor air quality, and increased rates of health problems linked to air pollution. Air sampling surveys find high concentrations of fine particulate air pollutants and volatile organic compounds, especially carcinogenic benzene and formaldehyde. More than 200 airborne chemical contaminants have been detected near fracking sites. Of these, 61 are hazardous air pollutants and carcinogens. 26 are endocrine-disrupting compounds. Exposure to fracking's fine particulate matter pollutants causes premature death, exacerbates asthma, and contributes to poor birth outcomes, and increased hospitalizations and emergency room visits. Air pollution near drilling and fracking operations is high enough in some Colorado communities to raise cancer risks. Regarding cancer, a 2017 study found that 55 carcinogens from fracking can contaminate both air and water and may increase the risk of childhood leukemia. A University at Albany study of air emissions from 74 large compressor stations in New York State found 39 chemicals that are human carcinogens. Air monitors near fracking sites in Ohio detected 32 air pollutants, including the carcinogens naphthalene and benzoate-pyrene. A 2018 survey of chemicals used in fracking operations found 74 known or suspected reproductive toxins, and some double as carcinogens. Of these, benzene and lead are found in both fracking fluid and in fracking wastewater. A 2017 study found elevated rates of bladder and thyroid cancers among residents living in areas of fracking. In southwestern Pennsylvania, dozens of children and young adults have been diagnosed with a rare cancer, Ewing's sarcoma, as well as other rare cancers in a 6-county area where there are more than 3,500 fracking wells. About children. Multiple studies of pregnant women living near fracking operations across the nation showed impaired infant health, including birth defects, preterm, and low birth weight. A study of 1.1 million infants born in Pennsylvania found poorer infant health and significantly lower birth weights among babies born to mothers living near fracking sites. A Colorado study found an elevated incidence of neural tube defects and congenital heart defects. The release of BTEX chemicals causes neurodevelopmental effects. Studies have found that exposure to both benzene and toluene can affect learning and memory. Children are especially susceptible to toxic exposures affecting fetal organ systems. Maternal benzene exposure is linked to neural tube defects. In Texas, mothers living in areas with high benzene levels were more likely to have children with spina bifida. In a retrospective study of 125,000 births in rural Colorado, McKenzie found that the higher prevalence of neural tube defects was associated with the highest exposed mothers. In Oklahoma, there was a significantly increased prevalence of neural tube defects among children whose mothers lived within 2 miles of a fracking site. Several studies demonstrate that gestational polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon exposure in humans has been linked with various adverse neurodevelopmental effects. On respiratory disease, multiple studies in Pennsylvania show that as the number of gas wells increase in a community, so do rates of hospitalization, especially for pneumonia in the elderly. Residents experience sleep disturbance, headache, throat irritation, stress, anxiety, cough, shortness of breath, sinus problems, fatigue, wheezing, and nausea. Fracking intensity in multiple studies correlated with increased rates of asthma, increased hospitalizations for pneumonia, kidney problems and skin problems, high blood pressure and signs of cardiovascular disease, symptoms of depression and anxiety, emergency room visits, and incidence of sexually transmitted diseases. On waste. Fracking wastewater cannot be filtered to create clean, drinkable water, nor is there any safe method of disposal. Recycling increases radionuclide levels in wastewater. Underground rock formations that receive fracking wastewater via injection into disposal wells, a practice linked to earthquakes, are reaching capacity in many regions. Fracking wastewater discharged into rivers via sewage treatment plants harms drinking water by creating dozens of new brominated and iodinated byproducts that are particularly toxic. With mega fracking, the demand for water in fracking operations has soared, making the problem of drinking water depletion and disposal of toxic fracking wastewater so much worse. On noise, drilling and fracking operations expose workers and residents to continuous noise at harmful decibel levels and is linked to cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, and sleep disturbance. In Colorado, noise measured during construction and drilling of a large multi-well pad in a residential area exceeded levels known to increase the risk of cardiovascular diseases and hypertension, and sound barriers did not solve the problem. In West Virginia, excess noise levels inside homes located near compressor stations led to sleep disruption, poor academic performance, and hypertension. A UK health impact assessment identified stress and anxiety resulting from drilling-related noise. So in conclusion, it is clear there are significant negative health impacts from fracking that cannot be fixed through regulations. Consequently, health professionals and scientists in the United States and around the world are increasingly calling for a ban on fracking activities. In addition, groups of doctors and scientists are calling for comprehensive long-term studies of the full range of effects of fracking. The evidence points to major knowledge gaps and shamefully shows the secrecy and intimidation that impede scientific inquiry. Altogether, findings from our investigations demonstrate that fracking poses significant threats to air, water, health, safety, community, economy, biodiversity, and climate stability. That rapidly expanding body of evidence is massive, troubling, and cries out for decisive action to protect the health of your people from fracking. Thank you.